Once allies, now rivals. The year is 1944 when Adolf Hitler gives the order to invade Hungary. It must be made part of the Reich, with or without its collaboration. But what were his reasons for occupying it? In this new military history video, we delve into the Führer's motives for betraying the Hungarian kingdom. Join us to discover what the invasion was like and what its repercussions were, especially for the Jewish people. Let's begin. On March 19, 1944, after a failed diplomatic visit by Hungarian Regent Miklós Horthy to Adolf Hitler, German forces advanced into Hungary. The occupation did not require major clashes or armed resistance. Operation Margarethe was executed easily, without opposition from the army or the majority of parliament. A large part of the population even accepted the arrival of the Third Reich troops with indifference, or even with a certain degree of collaboration. After all, for years, the alliance with Germany had granted Hungary sufficient political and territorial benefits for many sectors of the country to obey the Führer's orders without question.
The Germans crossed the border in trains, tanks and armored cars. They were ordered to act in a restrained manner but crush any resistance. The Hungarian army reported that only the forces in the Carpathians would be ready for action. Kálay called in army officers who were in Budapest. Some argued resistance was futile.
Miklós Horthy, who until then had attempted to maintain a degree of autonomy in Hungarian politics, found himself in an untenable position. There were no uprisings in his favor or attempts to stop the invasion. Seeing this, the regent had no choice but to accept the conditions imposed by Berlin. The first measure dictated by the Germans was the appointment of Dom Stolyai as prime minister. Until then, Hungary's ambassador in Berlin, Stolyai was a staunch supporter of the Axis and would ensure that the country complied with Nazi directives without hesitation. The second measure imposed was the arrival of SS Brigadeführer Edmund Veesenmayer, Hitler's personal envoy, whose mission would be to supervise the Hungarian government and guarantee its complete submission to German interests. At first, the impact of this change of power did not seem to affect the majority of the population. But there was one sector that immediately felt the brutality of the new regime: the Jewish community. Until then, Horthy had implemented discriminatory measures against the Jews, but had avoided mass persecution. However, with the German occupation, the situation changed radically. Within days, they were forced to wear the yellow star on their clothing, marking them as targets for future policies of segregation and violence. The person in charge of executing the new extermination strategy was Adolf Eichmann, one of the Reich's leading Jew cleansers. With ruthless precision, Eichmann organized one of the fastest deportations of World War II. What began with restrictions and segregation soon escalated into a systematic hunt. In just a few months, more than 400,000 Hungarian Jews were sent to Auschwitz in overcrowded trains, in inhumane conditions. For many, that March of 1944 marked the beginning of the end. Soon, for Hungarians, the war ceased to be a distant conflict and became a devastating reality. Allied bombs fell on Budapest and other strategic cities, while the Red Army approached from the east, crossing the Carpathian Mountains. At the same time, Adolf Eichmann, with the active collaboration of the Hungarian gendarmerie, accelerated the deportation of thousands of Jews to Auschwitz in one of the darkest episodes of the occupation. But the real turning point came in August 1944, when King Michael I of Romania led a coup d'état that overthrew Marshal Antonescu and declared war on Germany. This unexpected turn severely weakened Hungary's strategic position. With the withdrawal of the Romanian Axis forces, Hungary's defensive system was vulnerable. Initially, Soviet armored vehicles were contained on some fronts, but this was a momentary success. The pressure from the Red Army increased daily. In a desperate attempt to change the course of events, Miklos Horthy made a crucial decision. He dismissed Doma Stojai and halted the deportations of Jews. At the same time, he sent emissaries to Italy with the intention of negotiating an armistice with the Allies. However, the Western powers delegated the matter to the Soviet Union, forcing Hungary to establish contact with Moscow. These negotiations, far from halting the offensive, accelerated the German response. This time, the Führer would not be content with political intervention in the country. Now he would send heavy artillery to execute a total seizure of power. The Hungarian people, who had so defended him, were horrified. They could do nothing but wonder. Why did Hitler attack an allied country? To answer this question, it is necessary to understand why Hungary established relations with the Third Reich in the first place. The Austro-Hungarian Empire had been one of the biggest losers of the First World War. In 1919, after its brutal defeat, the country was forced to accept a peace treaty that imposed severe conditions. The most painful was the loss of 66% of its territory, a cession that fragmented its population and left millions of Hungarians under the rule of neighboring countries. This humiliation became the focus of national resentment and shaped Hungarian foreign policy for the following decades. The economic situation did not help stabilize the country either. The 1929 crash hit Hungary hard, sinking the price of its agricultural exports and causing the banking system to collapse. With the country mired in a severe crisis, General Gyula Goebbels assumed power in 1932, a leader who promised to restore the economy and return Hungary to its former prestige. Goebbels was quick to seek international alliances to strengthen his position. In 1933, just months after Adolf Hitler took office as Chancellor of Germany, he became the first foreign head of government to visit him. This rapprochement marked the beginning of a close relationship between the two countries. Germany, in the midst of rearmament, needed raw materials and support in Central Europe, while Hungary saw the Third Reich as an opportunity to recover the territories lost after the Great War. Although Goebbels's death in 1936 opened the door to more moderate governments, distancing itself from Germany became increasingly difficult. In 1938, the annexation of Austria into the Reich made Germany a direct neighbor of Hungary, intensifying political and military pressure. Within the country, nationalist and fascist movements were gaining ground, pushing the Hungarian authorities to strengthen their ties with the Nazi regime. The turning point came when Hitler began to redraw European borders. Thanks to the support of Germany and Italy, between 1938 and 1941, Hungary managed to annex several regions that had historically been part of the Kingdom of Hungary. Southern Slovakia, Subcarpathian Ruthenia, Northern Transylvania, and the Bačka region following the disintegration of Yugoslavia. These territorial gains temporarily strengthened support for the government, but they also further tied Hungary's fate to that of Nazi Germany. As World War II escalated, the nation found itself at a crossroads. On the one hand, it had obtained part of what it longed for. On the other, it was increasingly trapped in Hitler's war machine with no room to maneuver. The support of Germany and Italy did not come without cost. In exchange for the territorial annexations and political backing, Hungary had to make commitments that further tied it to the Axis. These included joining the Anti-Comintern Pact, severing diplomatic relations with the Soviet Union, withdrawing from the League of Nations, and granting privileges to the German minority within its borders. Furthermore, the Hungarian economy became almost entirely dependent on the Third Reich. By the time the government understood the true price of its alliance with Hitler, it was too late to back down without catastrophic consequences. What at first seemed like an opportunity to regain lost glory soon became a trap from which there was no escape. The recovered territories, initially a cause for celebration, turned into a curse that dragged Hungary into the abyss along with Germany. All these factors prompted Horthy to attempt to declare an armistice with the Allies and the USSR.
For Hitler, the question was not to occupy Hungary, but how to occupy it. Would Hitler allow Romanian, Slovak, and Croat troops to take part in the invasion and dismemberment of the kingdom? Wilhelm Hutto, the head of the German Secret Service in Hungary, recommended a political solution with military force.
Hitler's greatest fear was that Hungary would follow the same path as Italy a few months earlier. The betrayal of his former ally, Benito Mussolini, and Italy's turn to the Allies in September 1943, had been a severe blow to the Axis. Germany could not allow the same situation to repeat itself in Hungary, a key country for its strategy in Eastern Europe. The fall of Mussolini and Italy's change of side set off alarm bells in Berlin. On July 25th of that year, the Grand Fascist Council voted to remove Mussolini and handed control of Italy to King Victor Emmanuel III and Marshal Pietro Badoglio. Although the new government initially pledged its loyalty to Germany, it secretly negotiated with the Allies. When Italy finally signed the armistice with the British and Americans on September 8, 1943, Hitler reacted with brutal swiftness. He ordered the occupation of the country and the creation of a puppet regime in the north, led by Mussolini, rescued from his prison in the Gran Sasso by the commandos of Otto Skorzeny, the same officer who would seize Buda Castle a year later. By 1944, the war was clearly tilting in favor of the Allies, and pressure on Hungary was mounting. Horthy, who had never been a staunch follower of Hitler, had an awkward meeting with the leader just before Operation Margarethe. It was clear that neither man was happy with the other.
Hitler gave him a 1-hour monologue. Hitler claimed the Hungarian soldiers had fought bad, and their morale was bad, and their leadership was bad, and the Hungarian government was bad. Horthy did not stand up to Hitler, but remained his dignity, stating that he would leave the performance of the Hungarian army for future historians to determine.
Hungary was crucial to Germany for several reasons. First, it served as a bulwark against the Red Army's advance into Central Europe. Second, its resources, particularly its agricultural and industrial production, remained valuable to the Reich, which was already suffering from shortages. Finally, Hungary had a key role to play in the defense of the Eastern Front alongside Romania. Hitler knew that if Hungary switched sides, Romania could soon follow suit, opening the doors of the Balkans to the Red Army and accelerating the collapse of the Axis. On the battlefield, morale among Hungarian soldiers plummeted and desertions increased. Alarmed by the possibility that Hungary would follow Romania's lead and break with the Axis, the Führer ordered a coup d'état to seize full control of the country before it was too late. The key to the operation would be the capture of Buda Castle, Horthy's residence, and the nerve center of the government. The task fell to Otto Skorzeny, an expert in special missions. Thus, Operation Panzerfaust began. On October 15, 1944, Hungary experienced a chaotic day. At dawn, Mickey Horthy, the regent's youngest son, was intercepted by Skorzeny's agents under the pretext of meeting with envoys of the Croatian communist leader Tito. In reality, it was a trap. He was kidnapped, wrapped in a carpet, and flown to the Mauthausen concentration camp. This psychological blow further weakened his father's already precarious position. At 2 p.m., national radio broadcast a message in which Horthy announced an armistice with the Allies. For a few hours, the inhabitants of Budapest believed the war was over. But the illusion quickly faded. Meanwhile, members of the Hungarian Fascist Party, the Arrow Crosses, seized the radio station and issued orders to continue fighting alongside the Germans. Otto Skorzeny, stationed with his men near Buda Castle, waited for the signal to act. His objective was to take the regent's residence with as little bloodshed as possible. Finally, at 5:59 a.m. on October 16th, the assault began. In less than an hour, Skorzeny's forces took control, leaving only 7 dead, 3 Hungarians and 4 Germans. However, Horthy was not at the castle. He had sought refuge in the Apostolic Nunciature, but was soon captured. At 8:15 a.m., forced by circumstances, he officially abdicated. The following day, he and his family were sent to the Reich, where they were held in custody at the Bavarian Hirschberg Castle. Meanwhile, in Budapest, the brutality of the new regime was immediately evident. With the support of the SS, the Arrow Crosses began their first major raid against the capital's Jewish community. Within days, hundreds were rounded up and murdered on the banks of the Danube or deported in inhumane conditions. On November 3rd, Ferenc Selassie, leader of the Arrow Crosses, assumed power with the title of Guide of the Nation. From that moment on, Hungary was under a puppet government serving the Third Reich. Despite growing resistance in the streets and the unstoppable advance of the Red Army, Selassie remained loyal to Hitler until the very end. But even invading Hungary, Hitler did not achieve what he wanted. Complicity with the Axis made the country a sworn enemy of the Allies and, above all, of the Soviet Union. When the Red Army reached Hungary, it did so with the same determination with which it had defended Stalingrad. The battle for Budapest, which lasted more than 100 days between late 1944 and early 1945, was a living hell. The city was devastated. The Hungarian and German forces were annihilated, and the civilian population suffered atrocities similar to those that had plagued other occupied territories. The Jewish community, already punished by deportations and the reign of terror imposed by the Nazis and their local allies, faced the final horrors of the conflict. Thousands of Hungarian women fell victim to violence as the country descended into chaos. For Hitler, Budapest was of key strategic importance. It contained some of his last oil reserves and provided direct access to Vienna, so he ordered a fierce defense of the city. However, the effort was in vain. The weakening of the Third Reich after the failed Operation Barbarossa, in which Hungary had also participated with heavy losses, made it impossible to resist the Soviet offensive. Ultimately, Budapest fell, sealing Hungary's fate in the war. Today, we can say that the country has suffered a great decline since its defeat in World War I. Despite trying to regain its territory and power by allying with Hitler, Hungary only succeeded, once again, in becoming embroiled in a war that devastated its civilian and military well-being. Its poor strategic decisions have relegated it from a rising power to a country that fades into obscurity in contemporary history. We have no way of knowing if, in the future, he will be able to regain some of his lost power. That's it for today's military history video. If you like this type of content, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell to stay up to date with all our installments. Without further ado, we bid you farewell until next time.